Hello. In this lesson we're going to look at the first 5 cards of the suit of Pentacles, which is the suit of Earth. Now, before we actually look at the cards, something I want to talk about is the fact that this suit, more than any other, is prone to variations within the range of tarot decks that are out there. Obviously we're discussing these as the suit of Pentacles because we're using the Waite-Smith Tarot, and obviously with this having become the template for most modern tarot decks, this is the suit that we generally see. It's generally referred to as Pentacles, and as you can see on here, we can see a disc containing a pentagram, and for the most part that's how they're portrayed. But there are lots of different variations, some of this due to the evolution of tarot history. For instance, this suit was not always known as the suit of Pentacles. In the earlier days of tarot, I mean, this is the ace from a standard Marseille deck. This would have been referred to as the ace of coins. Initially that's what the suit started out as. So it was very much literally depicting money. Some modern decks still do depict the suit as coins. I can think of several, particularly something like Ciro Marchetti's Tarot of Dreams would still refer to this deck as coins rather than pentacles. It's interesting when you look at Aleister Crowley's deck. So this came after the Rider-Waite. The suit is referred to as the suit of discs. I'll explain that in a minute. Basically, as tarot became more of a tool for magical orders and people interested in the occult, that's when the concept of the pentacle rather than the coin began to sort of find its way in. You can see this in the Golden Dawn Tarot. Obviously this was the sort of immediate predecessor for the Rider-Waite. Coins have been replaced by pentacles at this stage. This is the ace. Now, how would you define a pentacle? A pentacle is generally circular, and it generally contains magical or protection symbols. So in this case you can see that the Golden Dawn pentacle contains the cross, and it's basically surrounded by concentric circles, different colours, all of which probably have symbolism, and sort of there's rays emanating from the cross. In the case of the Waite-Smith Tarot, Waite chose to include the symbol of the pentagram within his pentacle, which I think is a really apt choice. I mean, when you think the pentagram can represent several things. It can be a map of the 5 senses, for instance, which immediately ties this suit to the physical world and the body. It can also be a map of the human body, if you think of the tip of the pentagram representing the head, the 2 points to the side representing the outstretched arms, and the 2 bottom representing the legs and the feet. So again, it ties the symbol very much to the body and to the realm of the earth. Because this deck obviously set the pattern, this is now what most tarot readers and tarot practitioners think of as a pentacle. So most modern decks will follow this pattern. Pentacles don't always have to be round. I mean, for the most part they are. I love Ciro Marchetti's Gilded Tarot because the pentacles in this are pentagonal. So that's a beautiful little variation. Quite apt, because even in the world of magic, a pentacle doesn't necessarily have to be round. So this is interesting because you find that in some sort of the later modern decks, the pentacle has been substituted again. In this case, in the Heindel Tarot, the pentacle and the coin have been replaced by the suit of stones. Now this is obviously very much earth-based, so it's still completely apt. The main thing is that obviously the element is represented, and as I say, while we're working with the Waitsmith, this is the most standard and most widely used symbol. But be aware that if you come to move on to other tarot decks in the future, you'll see, as I said, a big range of variations, all of which are fine, but just so that you're not surprised. Okay, so starting with the ace. We're going to be working through cards ace through to 5 in this lesson. So, as we see, we've already seen this image. You can see a divine hand reaching out from the clouds, cupping what looks like a huge golden pentacle. The hand is in the sky, and the pentacle and the hand are floating above a very rich and green garden. You can see a garden path leading to actually to a green gateway, which I always found quite intriguing. You can see mountains beyond that. There are lilies in this garden. It's a very, very beautiful scene. So once again, aces representing the beginning of everything. If an ace appears in a reading like this, think of it as a fresh beginning, but a beginning within this realm. This is the realm of Earth, so this is the realm of Earth itself, all things physical, all things material. It's the realm of the human body. It's the realm of our physical senses as experienced through the body. On a practical level, this is the realm of money and finances, obviously as denoted more literally in the earlier decks. Money, finances, material assets, physical possessions. It's the card of buildings, houses, workplaces, specific locations. So everything that's physical, everything that's tangible is represented by this deck. Obviously by implication, if this deals with the human body, it also deals with matters of health and physical well-being. One of the reasons I think the pentacle is a very apt evolution of the coin. The pentacle is a symbol of protection and well-being. So if we're into the realm of our health and our bodies, that's very apt. So if this ace was drawn in a reading, the most literal new beginning would be a birth, a childbirth. It can also represent new phases within these. It can be a new phase of wealth, a new phase of material acquisition. It can be, if you're thinking in terms of, our senses, this can be a heightened awareness of our physical being. It can be an expansion of our physical experience. This can be, if you were thinking of it in sexual terms, this would be a sort of exploration of what our bodies can give us in ways that we've never understood before. Other practical things that this can represent, the enjoyment of good food. If this appears, it's denoting the beginning of some new phase of prosperity and physical satisfaction. This is a very positive card. It's also a great card of stability. The realm of Pentacles and the realm of Earth, it's the most tangible, the most physical of the four elements. It's also the most stable. So if this appears, it's obviously heralding a sort of new phase of stability. That's its positive aspects. If you're going to look at the negative aspects of this card, or if you're using reversals, if we're going to reverse it, I often think when this appears in the reverse, it can actually denote a period of privation, or a period of not necessarily famine, but certainly a period of rationing. It can be a card of opportunities being lost rather than opportunities being, offered and given. It can be a card of opportunities being withdrawn. And I think as well, when you see this, the pentacle is actually cupped in the hand. So if you turn this upside down, I also see this as a card of opportunities being thrown away. It's when this denotes when things slip out of our grasp for whatever reason. Obviously, it's an ace. It's a singular. It's represented by the number 1. So, to recap, this represents a pure expression of the element of earth and a new beginning in that area. Okay. Moving on to the 2. Obviously, numerologically, we're now into the realm of duality instead of singularity. In the suit of pentacles, that then becomes a game of balance, which we see beautifully depicted in this image. Pamela Coleman Smith chose to show what I think is a jester juggling 2 pentacles. It's a jester or a juggler. This is another one of what we refer to as her stage cards. She was an experienced stage designer, and whether it's conscious or subconscious, it very much crept into her deck. You can see with a lot of these cards there is just a flat stage in the foreground. There's no attempt to even make it look like a real life setting. It is just a flat stage, and then the background actually appears as a backdrop. In some ways, that sense of theatricality, I think, fits very well. These archetypes and aspects of our lives being acted out, and that's very much what you see here. The juggler is in the foreground on the stage. 2 pentacles are being juggled. They're quite enigmatically wrapped within a figure of 8 or a lemniscate in occult terms. It's a symbol of infinity. So this is a juggle and a balance that is never ending, in a way. The background, you can see, is a very turbulent sea with ships rocking up and down on the waters. Again, denoting change, denoting, flux, instability in some ways. So this is referred to as the card of harmonious change. So you can see there, that's the Golden Dawn version. Now what's interesting about this, let me talk about the lemniscate, because actually it goes much further back. And if you look at a 2 of coins from one of the Marseille decks, the 2 of coins was always the signature card of the card manufacturer. So this is how it would very often have looked. You have the 2 coins with a banner wrapped around them, and in this case the banner shows that this is actually a late version of the Tarot de Marseille. This is the Grimaud Marseille, and this is dated 1930, but it also shows that it's based on the Nicholas Convert deck of 1748. But this was quite a common thing. You would see the 2 wrapped in this banner, and within the banner would always be the name of the manufacturer for the most part. Something that was very iconic about tarot decks, and what I think is interesting, is that the occultists started to play with that. They kind of played on that symbol, they kept it, and when you look at this is the Golden Dawn version, and basically what they did was they kept, in effect, the sort of motif of wrapping around that banner, wrapping around the pentacles as they've become here, but they turned that into the Ouroboros, the snake that is constantly eating itself, another symbol of infinity, and the figure of 8, the lemniscate. And you still see this on a lot of modern decks. I love Robert Place's Alchemical Tarot. He keeps just the simple image of the pentacles, but with the figure of 8 Ouroboros wrapping around it. Similar thing. Pamela Coleman Smith played with it even further. She kept the figure of 8, but she's used it. It's not a snake in this instance. It is just, a figure of 8 band that encloses the pentacles, but it shows that they're linked. You know, when the juggler throws one in the air, it will affect the movement of the other. You know, where one goes, the other one follows to a certain extent, or if not follows, it's kind of dragged along. It's dragged up and down. So, harmonious change. What's actually going on in this image? This is a juggle. It's a dance, and actually, it's very playful. It's playful in the midst of all this turbulence. And I think, in a way, that's, for me, that's always been one of the most powerful metaphors in the tarot. Our lives are lived in a constant state of flux and change, and no one element of our life is in isolation. You know, when one element changes, that change seeps out into other areas of our life. It influences other areas, and I think that's what's going on here. When the card is upright, when we're looking at it in its positive aspect, that dance of life and that constant flow and, you know, and sense of change within our lives is actually what keeps our lives healthy. This is about change and evolution for the good. And yeah, it is a very playful image, which I think it should be. If we're looking at this from a negative aspect, if the card's reversed, you know, this is maybe not change for the better. Sometimes this is when the juggle sort of gets out of our control. You know, we're struggling to sort of, you know, in a way where the pace of change controls us and sweeps us along in a not very positive or comfortable way. Or sometimes I think when this is reversed, this is when we just drop the coins. It's when the juggling act becomes too much. So this is change upright. I see this as change and the dance of life for the good. Reversed, this is kind of where sometimes, I think if it turns up reversed, sometimes we actually just need to drop everything, get off the conveyor belt, accept the damage, and then it's then a case of, you know, how do we re-engage? You know, how do we actually pick the pieces of this up again? So that's the two. The card of harmonious change. It's a card of duality. So one of the other things that could actually be denoted here is, if you're thinking in terms of people, this is obviously representing the single. If you draw the two, if you look at the two pentacles as symbols of people, this is where the influence of another will begin to affect our lives. This is kind of the interplay of how our actions affect others, particularly in one-on-one relationships, whether they're friendships, work relationships, or romantic relationships. And yeah, we're all linked. You know, we're all connected to each other. We don't function in isolation. And I think the card of harmonious change, the Two of Pentacles, really shows that in a very powerful way. So, moving from number 2 to the number 3, the Three of Pentacles. This is in the Golden Dawn system. It's called the card of material works. And 3 for me has always represented team effort. You know, with the 2, you're into the realm of collaboration, one-on-one. With the 3, you're into having to broaden your perspective to work within a group, which is what's shown here. Very often when that happens, you know, it's, you know, it has physical results. If you're thinking numerologically, and if you then translate that numerology into sort of a physical shape, 3 is the number of a triangle. So that's how the pentacles are arranged here. Material works are shown. Pamela Coleman Smith uses the metaphor of a sculptor. You know, he's carved the pentacles into the arch. You know, you can see he still is working. You know, but you see what we have here is, this is a church or an abbey setting. The second person here is the monk, or the priest. And the third person is the architect. So what this shows is a collaboration between the three. The sculptor is the person yielding the hammer and chisel, but he can only do his work with the architect and the abbot, you know. So this is a real card of collaboration. When it appears in a reading, I always read this as a collaborative card on one level. It can literally just speak of your own physical endeavours and, you know, the fruits of your labour. You know, in its most literal sense, that is what material works are. But very often, you know, I think this gets us to look at, you know, how we work and how we connect and how we collaborate with others for the greater good. That for me is what the most important message of this card. Reverse it or look at its darker aspect. You are very much into the realms of, on a practical level, selfishness in the workplace. I mean, how many of us have worked in environments where there is one person who just refuses to toe the line? They're determined they're going to do it their way, or they're going to undermine the power structure, you know, to sort of suit their own agendas. This is when collaborative effort begins to collapse. And I think if it appears in its dark aspect, we also have to examine ourselves. You know, we've also got to question our own motives. You know, are we working for the greater good with other people, or are we trying to serve our own purposes? Is that sustainable? Is it for the greater good? So a lot of questions in this card. But yeah, 3 is, to me, it's the triangle, it's the collaboration, it's the pyramid. Whoever's at the peak is actually supported by broader foundations at the base, which is very much the case with the sculptor here. He is the one that obviously is primarily recognised for the beauty of his work, but as we see here, the abbot and the architect are there in the background, and without them, his works couldn't have bore fruition. Okay. The 4 of Pentacles. So, 4 is the number of foursquare, stability. 4 is a number of being rock solid, as I see it. So in the realm of Pentacles, we are into the realm of what the Golden Dawn call earthly power. So how it's depicted here, you can see a king. So obviously that's the ultimate depiction of earthly power on one level. But this king has 1 pentacle lodged in his crown, 1 beneath each foot as he sat on his throne, and the 4th one is clasped to his chest. Now, if you think of the pentacles as symbols of empowerment, of protection, and of magic, that is a very, very powerful symbol. In effect, he has magical powers at his feet. In the crown, they inform his rational thoughts and his decision making, and clasped across his chest, they basically inform the workings of his heart, his instincts and his intuitions. He is, again, this is another stage card, and the backdrop is a sort of medieval town or city. In effect, this king could be on the ramparts of his castle, look, basically, interestingly, with his back to his kingdom, which I do find interesting. He's basically on the pinnacle. That's one thing that we can say with this. From a health point of view, this is somebody's physical well-being extremely well protected. From a financial gain point of view, this is somebody with great riches that is keeping them close to himself or herself. This is somebody who is very empowered. This is somebody who has great stability. But there's an Achilles heel to this. This is not the end of the sequence. This is only the 4th card out of 10. 4 may be a number of completion, but it's only a number of initial completion. And it means that there's actually still much more to come. This is not the end of the journey. There's a lot of light and dark aspects to this card. I mean, for instance, let's turn it upside down. A lot of people call this the card of the miser. This can be somebody who actually has been given a huge amount of wealth and privilege, but basically clasps it too close to their to their chest. Think tax evasion. That's what I always think with this card. People who make millions and billions and then register themselves in some sort of offshore tax haven. They're not paying into the community. They're not paying their due into society. So in its dark aspect, this represents a really unhealthy inequality, which is not sustainable. I think reverse, this could be somebody who fears for their health. This pentacle is being clasped, it's being clung to the body. There are 2 more being kept firmly under the feet, one in the crown. This is potentially a hypochondriac, somebody who fears illness, somebody who fears dying. What else have we got here? Yeah, turn this upside down. This is almost like a sort of, in the realm of pentacles, it's like a mini tower moment. This can be where you've kind of, everything that supposedly gives you physical stability and security, you've kept it so close to your chest, but then, it all collapses. He's upside down, he could topple off the throne. One interesting depiction of this, I think, is in the Thoth deck. Obviously, Frida Harris's illustrations are not pictorial in the sense that they are, in the Pamela Coleman Smith deck, but this is interesting because earthly power is depicted as a castle seen from above, and it's got so stable that the pentacles are no longer round. They're represented by the square turrets of the castle. Everything's 4 square. Each of those turrets has one of the symbols of the 4 elements in. A castle with high walls, a moat, the drawbridge. This is protectionism, particularly if it's reversed. That's real protectionism. That can be, on the individual level, on a community level, sometimes on a national level. We see so much of that at the moment, within our own world, countries just really closing the doors, with protectionist attitudes, mistrust, hostility. It's all depicted in this card in a reverse. I think if it appears in a reading, it does denote a great amount of stability. And I think it also asks us to look at what we've been given. I think when this appears, we kind of have to ask ourselves, what gives us security? But then we also have to ask ourselves, what gives us prosperity? What are we lacking? There's another message in this card. If that turns up like that, if we're struggling, if life really is a struggle and we don't have stability, we don't have health, that gets us to ask, what do I need? What do I need to reach out for? Who can help me? So lots and lots of questions in that card. It is only the number 4. And this card has a potential to unravel, I say. And we see that very much in the Five of Pentacles. Obviously, with the number 5, the stability of the square and, the solidity of the square has been disrupted. You're into... It's a funny one, the number 5. On one level, you're into the realm of the pentacle, which is a great symbol of protection. But then it's also a number of disruption, of the apple cart being upset, which is very much what we see in this image. It's not a very positive image. It's always been one of my favourites in the deck, I think, but maybe because it's so beautifully drawn here. There we are. That is the Five of Pentacles. In the Golden Dawn definitions, this is the card of material trouble. Pamela Coleman Smith chose to depict it. You can see the pentacles are built into the stained glass window of a church. Lights flooding through that window, so the interior of that church is probably bright and warm. The exterior, however, you can see a snowstorm, the snow on the ground, and you see what looks like a crippled beggar and a beggar with leprosy. The reason we know that is because the second beggar has a bell round their neck. So these are two people who are destitute, who they are everything that the suit of Pentacles doesn't stand for. There is no wealth, there is no health, there's no sense of well-being, there's no joy, there's no community, there's no family. We'll see those themes explored in later cards. These are destitute people, and they are in effect the embodiment of material trouble and material worry. Now, Pamela Coleman Smith took it further. If you look at the medieval symbolism of a church was referred to as what was known as sanctuary. And it was basically a place of social welfare, of social care. The church, in effect, basically fulfilled the role that the modern welfare state fulfills. It was charity, it was community help, it was medical help, it was, support for the poor, all those things. It was also, if you were on the run or if you were in a feud, if you were even wanted by the state, if you went into a church and claimed sanctuary, you in effect had immunity. And it's interesting here that for all that church window represents in this seemingly medieval setting, these two figures are just walking past. And you even wonder whether they see the window and the bright colours. What's inferred here is that they don't realise what help is on offer to them. And very often we can see that in our own lives. We can be in a real crisis, and because we're so wrapped up in the crisis for understandable reasons, we don't always see objectively. We can't always see that the help we need may well be nearer than we think, Even in its upright aspect, this is a difficult card, because upright, it's negative. The upright aspect to me is the negative aspect, the dark aspect of this card. If you reverse it, you're then looking at the positive aspect. Maybe when this is reversed, this is at a point where we can reach out for help. Sometimes we're just so traumatized within a situation we can't see that help could potentially be at hand. There are times when, I can certainly relate to this, I'm sure everyone can. There are times in life where we're just too proud to reach out for help. And actually, if this appears, that's the challenge. If you're struggling, if you're depressed, obviously this literally denotes physical health issues. It is about reaching out for help. So when it's reversed, maybe that help has been accessed. Maybe we're in a position where we now can receive the help that we need. Because beautifully with this card, the light shines through the windows. The pentacle itself is a symbol of physical well-being. So that's the challenge in that card. Reach out when you need it, because the help is very often there. So that is cards 1 to 5. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at cards 6 through to 10, and then we'll wrap up our journey through the suit of Pentacles with the court cards. See you next time. If you've enjoyed this lesson and found it helpful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel to find out when I share new videos or go live. You can also find me on Instagram at Chris Butler Artist, on Twitter at Butler Tarot, and on Facebook at The Sacred Tarot. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.